In May of 1944, the Allied armies in Italy were finally on the verge of a breakthrough. After months of brutal stalemate, their target was clear: the German 10th Army retreating north through central Italy. The orders were simple: strike fast, seize the town of Valmontone, and sever Highway 6, the lifeline of the German retreat. By cutting this critical road, the Allies could trap tens of thousands of enemy troops, cripple Nazi defenses in Italy, and perhaps even open the road to southern Germany. It had all the makings of a decisive victory, one that could end the Italian campaign in a single blow. But not everyone was focused on Valmontone. One American general had his eyes set elsewhere, on a different prize. Lieutenant General Mark Clark, commander of the US. Fifth Army had another city in mind: Rome. It was just miles away. Ancient, symbolic, glorious. The first Axis capital to fall. And he knew it wouldn't stay undefended forever. To Clark, the opportunity to be the first to liberate Rome was more than strategic, it was personal. His men had suffered through mud and blood at the Rapido River, had been crushed at the Gustav Line. Now, with victory so close, Clark began to wonder, why should the British enter Rome while his army chased retreating Germans? So, just as the Allied armies were closing the net around the German 10th Army, Clark made a fateful decision. He went dark, vanishing from communications as his staff activated a covert alternative plan: Operation Turtle. Instead of striking Valmontone to cut off the German retreat, his army would pivot northwest, straight toward Rome. It was a gamble. Some would call it ambition. Others, betrayal. But either way, it would reshape the Italian campaign. To understand the weight of this choice, we need to rewind. For months, the Gustav Line had torn the Allied armies apart. German machine guns swept the valleys with deadly precision. 88mm cannons pounded every road, every bridge, every exposed position. Towering over it all was Monte Cassino, a medieval monastery turned fortress, watching over the battlefield like a god of war. British, American, and French units had been slaughtered trying to break through. At Anzio, a surprise Allied landing had turned into a grinding stalemate, prompting Winston Churchill's bitter remark, "I had hoped we were hurling a wildcat into the shore, but all we got was a stranded whale." But in May 1944, a new plan, Operation Diadem, was launched. This time, the British 8th Army would push through the Liri Valley, while Clark's 5th Army protected their flank. The idea was standard Allied doctrine: soften the enemy with artillery, advance under smoke, and pray for a breakthrough. Yet not all commanders were convinced this was the best way. French General Alphonse Juin, commanding the French Expeditionary Corps, had a bold alternative. He proposed a flanking maneuver through the rugged Urunsi Mountains terrain the Germans considered impassable. Juin's Moroccan and Algerian troops had trained in the mountains of North Africa. They knew how to fight there. He wrote Clark again and again, outlining in detail how they could breach the line. Clark never responded. He wasn't about to take strategy from a Frenchman, but Juin would get his chance. On May 11th, as the main Allied assault ground to a halt in the Liri Valley, the French launched their mountain attack. The results were staggering. The Goumiers and Tirailleurs moved like shadows, scaling cliffs, creeping through ravines, attacking positions the Germans hadn't even fortified. Within days, the French had shattered the Gustav Line's southern flank. Kesselring's defensive masterpiece began to collapse. German troops were forced to fall back. The stalemate was finally broken, and the race for Rome had begun. But victory brought chaos. As the Germans retreated, Field Marshal Harold Alexander ordered 5 British divisions to advance along a single highway. The result was a predictable disaster: traffic jams stretched for miles, leaving the 8th Army stalled for nearly 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the French pushed ahead alone, dangerously overextended, nearly 20 miles ahead of their allies. At the same time, General Truscott's VI Corps at Anzio prepared to break out. The Allied plan was now clear. Truscott would strike northeast, seize Valmontone, and cut off Highway 6, the main artery, feeding the German retreat. If the plan worked, it would be Stalingrad in reverse. The Germans would be crushed as they fled. And at first, everything was going according to plan. On May 25, 1944, Truscott's troops smashed through German defenses at Cisterna. Valmontone lay just a few miles ahead. The German 10th Army was vulnerable, its back exposed. With one hard push, the Allies could slam the door shut. Alexander's trap was ready. But Mark Clark had already decided to spring his own. Weeks earlier, in secret meetings at his headquarters in Caserta, Clark had instructed Truscott to prepare alternate plans, ones Alexander knew nothing about. Operation Buffalo would proceed toward Valmontone, but Operation Turtle, if executed, would swing the main force northwest toward Rome. Now, as VI Corps reached the decisive crossroads, Clark made his move. But he didn't confront Truscott himself. Instead, he sent Brigadier General Donald Brann with new orders. Abandon the main thrust toward Valmontone. Begin Operation Turtle immediately. Redirect the bulk of the army toward Rome. Truscott read the orders in disbelief. He knew exactly what they meant. The German 10th Army would escape. His operations officer watched as Truscott's face turned red. He demanded to speak with Clark directly, but the general was nowhere to be found. As his staff reported, Clark had carefully taken himself out of contact. At 11 a.m., Truscott gave the order. The 1st Armored Division, the 3rd Infantry Division, and the elite 1st Special Service Force turned away from Valmontone. Only a token force continued. The majority of the VI Corps wheeled northwest, abandoning the trap that could have ended the Italian campaign. The German 10th Army, stunned but relieved, began retreating in force. Clark later made no apologies. "We not only wanted the honor of capturing Rome," he said, "but felt that we deserved it." By the morning of May 26, Field Marshal Alexander discovered what had happened, but it was too late. The Germans were already pouring through Valmontone in massive numbers, tanks, trucks, artillery, all escaping northward without interference. The trap was gone. Still, for Clark, one prize remained. 30 miles away stood the Eternal City, Rome. On the 4th of June, year 1944, at exactly 6 a.m., Captain T. Mark Radcliffe led a patrol of 60 men from 20 Corps into the southern gates of Rome. Their convoy, 18 jeeps, and 2 armored cars rolled through the Porta San Giovanni. Cameramen filmed the moment as the first Americans entered the city. But the city wasn't safe yet. German machine guns opened fire from a building just ahead. Then came the deep metallic roar of Tiger tanks moving into position. Radcliffe's men scrambled for cover. One of his vehicles, equipped with a 37mm gun, was practically useless, like, as he later said, a bee against an elephant. Then came a moment of unexpected heroism. From a 3rd-floor window, an Italian partisan spotted a Tiger commander opening his hatch. With a quick motion, the partisan lobbed a grenade into the tank. The explosion rocked the vehicle, smoke pouring from its turret. In the confusion, Radcliffe's men made a break for it, fighting their way deeper into the city. Elsewhere in Rome, similar scenes unfolded. Competing Allied task forces collided in the chaos. Shermans from Task Force Housey dueled with German rearguards near the Cinecittà studios. Task Force Ellis pushed through the Via Tuscolana. Every division wanted the honor of being first. Meanwhile, Mark Clark had made sure that moment would belong to him. He ordered military police to block any British troops from entering the city. Rome was to be taken by the Americans, and the Americans alone. By the afternoon, the press conference was underway. Clark stood in front of ancient ruins, cameras flashing. "This is a great day for the 5th Army," he declared. And it was, for him. But just 30 miles east, the German 10th Army was streaming through Valmontone untouched. 3 divisions, the 94th Infantry, the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, and the 362nd Infantry, all escaped intact. They would soon dig in at the Gothic line north of Florence, creating another fortified barrier. And the war in Italy would continue for almost another year. 2 days after Clark's triumph in Rome, the Allies stormed the beaches of Normandy. The liberation of Rome was instantly overshadowed, but the consequences of Clark's decision would remain. Those 3 German divisions would hold the Allies back in Italy until May of 1945. More than 320,000 Allied casualties would be suffered in the Italian campaign, many of them after Rome had already fallen. Historians were ruthless. British war correspondent Alan Wicker, who had witnessed the campaign firsthand, called it the worst blunder of the entire war. A German military historian later wrote, "It was thought only a miracle could prevent another Stalingrad south of Rome." General Clark provided that miracle. Critics pointed to a pattern. Clark had wavered at Salerno, had sent the 36th Infantry Division into disaster at the Rapido River, and now had abandoned Valmontone. Rome, they noted, had been declared an open city. There was no real military glory in taking it. Clark had traded a strategic victory for a symbolic prize. And as a final touch, he had the Roma city sign uprooted and shipped to his home a trophy from what many saw as a hollow triumph. Yet Clark had defenders too. In later interviews, he claimed his intelligence officers warned of a German trap at Valmontone. The 362nd Division, he said, was already blocking the valley. Driving the VI Corps through such a narrow corridor might have led to disaster. Others pointed out that Highway 6 wasn't the only retreat route. Valmontone wasn't the silver bullet Alexander imagined. But numbers don't lie. The war in Italy continued long after Rome fell. The opportunity to trap the German army was lost. And while Clark would rise to full general, and even command in Korea, the verdict of history came from the voices of soldiers, men who watched Wehrmacht convoys escape, while flashbulbs popped in the streets of Rome.